Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight. I'm Lauren Scott, Chair of the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee. In this episode, we are excited to welcome Spirit of Texas 2023 honoree Kat Fajardo, author of the graphic novel Miss QUINCES. I would also like to welcome our host, who is our fellow Spot Committee member, Heather Rowan. Heather, go ahead and take it away.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk with you, Kat, about your amazing graphic novel. This was one of my favorite reads of 2022 going into 2023, and I'm so psyched to talk to you about it and learn more about your writing process and just your experiences that got woven into writing this amazing graphic novel.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
One of my favorite things about this graphic novel is that it goes so much into the making of comics. Our main character, Sue, loves comics, eats, sleeps, and breathes comics, but her family doesn't always appreciate her passion for it. They don't really get her intense enthusiasm and how all-consuming it is for her. Over time, she ends up with, maybe a greater appreciation for her family as part of spending more time with them. And they end up showing that they do understand quite a bit more, maybe, than she assumes they do about her. Do you have any advice for our middle grade and middle school kiddos who feel that maybe their parents don't get their passions and interests, what's important to them?
Oh, Heather, you're just bringing out the hard questions, aren't you? No, it's a really good question. No, it's really hard because I still struggle with that as an adult too, like struggling with connecting with my parents and be like, hey, I loved making comics as a kid, but now I make comics as a career. And they slowly over time started to be more accepting and even a little bit I guess more aware and like to participate in my book signings and stuff like that. So over time, I would say to kids it's really hard at first to know that it's like a struggle to be frustrated of just your parents not understanding. But I would say to them, just don't give up. Try to find a community that will accept you and will appreciate what you love right off the bat. Either joining a school club or, a local library club as well. Um, or just finding like-minded friends. I think that really helps kind of feel more validating. I'm just like, oh, I love to do this and it feels right. And oh, you also love to do this. This is great. And then, I guess my advice also that I've learned the hard way is just, you know, although you do find your community that, loves and appreciate what you do, maybe try asking your parents of just hey, this is really important to me, do you mind spending 10 minutes just hearing me out, me talk about my favorite Pokemon or stuff like that, or my favorite card game, and maybe can you guys just look at these cards for a hot minute, because I think as adults we are so preoccupied with time that we have left over, or work, that sometimes it takes us a moment to step out of that, as long as we have a little reminder of just hey, this is important to someone that we love, let's just take 10 minutes to look at that. So I would say to kids, just just hold on to, just hold on, and but also be brave to speak up to your parents and be like, this is important, please help. Share this with me.
And I really love that about your book, right? Because it's about figuring out what's important both to yourself and to the people around you and how much that makes up a person. I think this is a really beautiful family story, right? We start out in Texas, we go visit family overseas in Honduras, and I think, watching those family relationships grow is really, the most beautiful, heartwarming part of this book. Obviously, the highlight of Sue's trip to visit her family in Honduras is getting to really know her abuela in a way that she couldn't before, that she couldn't just over the phone or over video calls. And just listening to her abuela's stories. Have you ever had that experience of getting to bond with relatives over their cuentos? Um, and is there a family story you might be willing to share?
Oh my gosh, so many stories. Yeah, I mean, to to go back to like what you're saying about the importance of spending time with family, especially with extended family that you don't see more than once a year. Like it's just those are just I call them little pockets of like happiness of just like, you get to remember, like I have fond memories of spending time in the kitchen with my abuela, like cooking and sharing stories in that way. And that kind of inspired Sue's relationship with her grandma in the book. And so for me, just like spending time with family and hearing the adventures and stories that they have is really important to me. Most of the stories that I remember are actually from my tias and like primas. And so most of them are ghost stories, which I really appreciate and love. I'm a spooky kid, so like at heart. So like, most of them are just like I think there's one particular story that really called out to me, and it's my one of my cousins and her sister were like sitting in front of a TV, and the house that they lived in was newly built, and it was built on a I think it was like an abandoned land area, which rumor has it might have been like a graveyard. Like who knows? Like it's Honduras, anything goes. And so apparently my prima and her sister were like watching novelas and on TV, and then at the corner of her eye, she sees something moving. And bear to mind, like it's just her and her sister in that house. And so like she sees the figure kind of move slowly in front of them, you know, and then she can kind of see through the figure as well. And then just like it came and then went. And even though that was like 1 second of like, lapse time, my pretty much just like was just like, okay, I must have been hallucinating. Like I don't know what I saw. And she turns around to her sister, and her sister's already on the floor on her knees, just like praying, like her life depended on it. And my prima's like, "Mm-mm, I cannot be here." And so she grabbed her hand and just like ran out, and just like they stayed out like all day until my her mom came back from work, and they had to go back like home eventually. But like it's like tales like that being told those kind of tales as a 10-year-old or like 15-year-old even, I'm just like, ooh, spooky. Like this is so cool. Like, it felt like sitting around a campfire, but with my family. So everyone had different stories like that, and even my abuela too. But that's probably for a whole different book. Like,
That makes me excited to see what you've got cooking up next. I love all the spooky tales. And definitely like this is a huge adjustment for Sue. Like visiting family, going from somewhere so quiet to just being constantly surrounded, sort of inescapably, by all these relatives, her sisters, her cousins, her aunts, just everybody together. What would you say is like the best part, and if it's stories, I totally understand, of getting to share that space with your extended family?
it's funny because I'm actually like an introvert. So I love my personal space, but I think it's when I'm visiting extended family for a certain amount of time that I grow to appreciate just being surrounded by people, especially like love and like, history and stuff. And so like, learning again stories from my family, or like spending time with them on the farm and just learning what their life is like. My grandpa lived on a farm, and he was like a farmer, and so like we would go on like horseback riding, just because we can. And just like moments of just kind of mindfulness in a way of just like, hey, we're gonna drink, cafecito and sit on the porch and just watch the sunrise while some of our extended family come visit us from like down the street, because everyone just lives in the same village. And so for me, that was so important. And like, especially, as a kid, like you want to have electronics, you want to have like Wi-Fi and cell phone, like you don't want to like remove like yourself from like the screen. But I think it was very important for me, for my family, to take those away from us, like that like electronics, and be like, hey, like spend time with us. And you get to appreciate that as an adult now. And so I hope to like eventually, when I have kids, or like interacting with my nephews or nieces, to be able to provide that for them too, wherever that may be, here, Honduras, or wherever. So it's just nice, and you get to appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's like a really good parallel because definitely in the book, your character's struggling with missing out on all her favorite things, right? Her access to all the like brand new comics and being able to hang out with her friends and being like seamlessly connected to them through technology. But, you know, she ends up really feeling like she had an experience she couldn't have had otherwise if she had been like so hooked up to all the things that she really wanted for her summer, right? If it had gone like her plan. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
so one of the things that I think is, you know, really tough for Sue and tough for a lot of kids who are going through that like middle school period of figuring out identity is, you know, she's got this complicated situation with identity. She's uncertain about her Latinidad, like in the US, where, you know, whiteness is kind of this default. She's worried about trying to be regular and trying to fit in. And then she goes to Honduras and she struggles with not feeling Honduran enough. As a, you know, creator of mixed heritage yourself, um, you know, how do you relate to Sue's struggle to fit in both places?
Oh, good question. A really good question. I feel like I struggled with that, especially in high school, because in middle school, it's just like, okay, I'm in this little bubble. I lived in a Latina like neighborhood, and most of my classmates are also Latina. So like we had that shared experience of just like, oh, this is, we have very similar cultures, and we feel very comfortable. But it wasn't until high school where I had to travel to like a different neighborhood to be like, oh, like there's other people from other types of like backgrounds. Oh, there's also like white students too. Like it was just a culture shock that like it felt like every time I were to voice something about my family or like culture, it just met with like, I wouldn't say disdain, but just like confusion, and just like I got these reactions that made me realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't be like speaking about my experiences. Like they don't understand. And so like that's when I started to gravitate towards like, okay, I need to feel more American in order to fit in with my peers. And so like that pressure was happening around that time. And yeah, and then I think like Sue's experience was inspired by my own experience as well, of feeling like neither here or there, like ni de aquí ni de allá, like experience of just like I feel too Latina for my friends, but I also feel too white for my family, and so that struggle of balancing those two worlds was a lot for me at that time, and so I wanted to explore that feeling in Miss Quinces as well, especially with Sue, and just being a byproduct of her environments, both of them. And so, um, yeah, and it's a very common experience for a lot of like first generation, not even Latina, but like every sort of like immigrant experience as well. So like, I gravitate towards those side of stories because like I didn't really see a lot of that growing up in the books that I've read, and so I gravitate towards it because I understood from like an emotional and just like from experience. So it's hard.
I definitely agree with that. Like my experience of being an immigrant is going to be different than, you know, a lot of like Latina people who are first or second or third generation Americans. But I think there's, you know, a lot in common with our experiences of being immigrants or children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants. Um,
Hmm.
do you have any
Yeah.
advice for teens like Sue who are still struggling to work through what it means to them and feel like they're never fully going to be part of, you know, either part of their like hyphenated American identity, especially ones who are hoping for that feeling of belonging when they go back to wherever their family's from and visit relatives and then get there and feel maybe even more a fish out of water than they did when they were back home.
Yeah, I would say from experience, eventually I had to let go of that fear that was holding me back, of just like, worrying about what others may think of me, whether it's my family or my friends. Like, am I gonna step out of line by, saying like exchanging ideas of like what I think my life should be? And like thinking about the what ifs would only, I feel like, would hold you back, as opposed to like the what is, like, what is your definition of your authentic self? Like, does that mean, sharing your cultural food with your friends, and if they may not like it, and be like, okay, well, you're gonna have to deal with that because that's just a part of who I am, stuff like that. And just like, who you are makes you special, and you should be able to like embrace that. And our identity is something that we should define, then have that job as a job for other people to do. So like that's something I learned the hard way, and I hope like with Miss Quinces I was able to like translate that feeling and sentiment through like Sue, because that's a hard lesson to learn on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That's definitely
Mhm.
tough. I really love how, so obviously Sue is working out a lot of aspects of her identity, and she's not always sure how much her family gets her, and she feels pretty betrayed by the surprise quinceañera celebration as part of going back to visit family as part of their, agreement to get to comics camp. But
Mhm.
as it turns out, her family is actually working really hard not to stuff Sue into this sort of pink ruffle shaped hole. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, they're pretty understanding. I don't want to spoil anything. If you were to go back and plan that ultimate like birthday party for teenaged you, what elements would your birthday party include?
This is, I think, my favorite question so far. It's really fun. Um, I think I think I would have definitely have loved like a gothy party or like a Halloweeny party. I'm obsessed with Halloween. It's one of my favorite like holidays as a kid. Um, but if I wanted to like impress my friends, I guess I was really obsessed with like Japanese rock back in the day when I was a kid. And so like Visual K, which is the type of rock I used to listen to, it's sort of like glam rock where it's just um like it's like Japanese bands that dress up in like goth, and like they have frilly shirts and like makeup. And I would have loved to do something close to that, and have my attendees dress up in Visual K outfits as well, so it feels more little bit more interactive, than just like everyone focus on the quinceañera with the big poofy dress. And so I would have loved to do that, and maybe add like karaoke like part of it, like it would be really fun. And if like little cherry on top, if I can just somehow bring all my friends from New York to and all my family from Honduras to this party and have like karaoke, everyone together, I think that would have been really fun to like watch and witness to be a part of. So I would have loved that. Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good
that's great.
question.
I love that. There's so much, we could go back and do, and I really appreciate the elements that her family tried to include for Sue to make it special and personal to her. So you've lived in a variety of different places in the U.S., in Texas, and like you just said, in New York. Um, Obviously, there is so much diversity in Latinidad, but would you say what are some elements of like Hispanic or Latina American culture that you feel are somewhat universal in your experience?
Hmm. I would say, from based on my experience, it's the sense of like community that's always there. The sense of like, knowing that someone will have your back despite like the language barrier, or like, despite the fact that you're strangers. Especially here in Texas. I just like, you know, back in New York, there's just different cultures, and different, like everyone knows some sort of Spanish in a way. So like over there, it's just like expected for people to speak Spanish. But here in Texas, it's like really rare. So when it does happen where like I'm speaking with someone who only speaks Spanish, I'm just like, oh my God, like let me help you out. And like, it's just like that sense of community of just we're just, I think culturally we're just very giving. And so like if we see someone is like in need of help, we go out of our way to make sure that they're okay, and it just feels like you're part of a family or like community everywhere I go. So it's just really nice to experience that in a state, in a new place that I don't have any like attachment or like experience with in general, because moving here into Texas was like a big change in my life, and I'm just like, I don't know anyone. How do I like, where's all like the Spanish food and stuff? And so like, it's just really nice, and just having little pockets of happiness and joy with like strangers is it's been really rewarding. So Yeah, Texas has been really nice to me so far.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm such a big fan. Obviously, we don't have the same diversity of South and Central American communities, in Austin, particularly where I am, and I think you are as well.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, things are much more like Mexican American and a bit more Guatemalan American, but not, all the other things. So I'm glad you're still able to find that like sense of community and of belonging here, um, with all
Yeah.
things.
And it
Um,
feels like it finds you, then you like I it's really rare that I search out for it because I'm just like, where's the like Honduran food? And it's like really hard to find. But then somehow like out of nowhere, I would talk to someone, they're just like, oh yeah, there's one down like the street, like a food truck. And I'm just like, it's a it's like it finds a way towards in my life. Like it's awesome.
I love that. I love the like magical tendency of it. Um,
Mhm.
and lots of your work does deal specifically with being Hispanic in the US. And I know that those weren't materials that were around for kids and teens when I was a kid so much, and when you weren't. So I'm so excited that there's a whole generation of kids growing up just experiencing that as completely normal, that there are so many different resources and ways for them to see characters working through a lot of the same things and living in communities like they live in. I think that's really wonderful, and it's about time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so cool that like I'm like low key very jealous that they get to have access to all these like materials and like and stories, but at the same time I'm just like, man, this next generation are going to be like really well-rounded like adults like who know who they are and like yeah, identity and all that. So like it's really cool for the next generation to have all these materials. I'm very excited to see what kind of adults they become.
So, assuming that some of your readers are those kids really identifying with those stories, but also your book is amazing. And I bet has a really, really wide range of readers. So, I definitely have kids who are being introduced to the idea of a quinceañera for the first time, as well as kids who are reading it and are very familiar. And this is, absolutely stuff that they completely identify with in every way. What are you hoping your readers get as some takeaways from this Quinces?
I guess like aside from learning what a quinceañera is, because I think that's the beauty of this book, of like being able to connect not only to like people with the same background as me, but also people who had no idea what a quinceañera is, or like they try to find like this book as a way to connect to other like Latina culture. And so it's just like it's nice to provide that for people. Um, yeah, aside from that, I guess learning how to embrace yourself, learning how to like, if you feel like you're weird, like that's cool, that's awesome. Weird is fantastic. Like, just like honor that about yourself and just go with it and just know that your uniqueness can define you, but that's a good thing. And if you feel like an outsider in your own home, like don't worry. Like I'm pretty sure some family members also feel the same way. So everyone is just always in their head. So like it's just nice to yeah. So being weird is good.
I love that. And we see bits of that, right? Her friends are all interested in some of the same things as Sue, but they each have their own quirks and their own passions. And that's, I think, Sue starts out sort of seeing her family a little bit monolithic and feels like the
Mm.
weird one out, and then starts to discover a little bit more of her, her siblings' quirks, her cousins' quirks, her, aunts, and obviously like her abuelas, her grandmother's, adventures. Her grandmother isn't the person that she would have assumed she was. Her grandmother had, such a vibrant life, that Sue
Yeah.
didn't know anything about. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
No, that's a really good point. And just like, you know, um, embracing what you discover about your family, but also like, honoring yourself, but also be like, hey, tradition is totally fine. It's not like your enemy. Like you can kind of incorporate that to who you are. So yeah, that's a really good point.
So the center point of your story is that Sue is thinking that she's sort of begrudgingly going on this very rural, tech-free family trip to visit her relatives in Honduras. And then she's ambushed into having the quince that she thought she had successfully avoided in the US. And I was certainly like big in my feelings, very angry on Sue's behalf. Obviously, it turns out right in a much different way than we would have expected, but this work is, includes some autobiographical elements. Did your family ever trap you into something you didn't fully agree with or understand in advance?
Kind of. So like fortunately, unlike Sue, like I don't think I felt like I was trapped into doing something. I think that I had like a just like a choice in the end. And I had a feeling, my parents was going to bring up the quinces because my like cousins had it, my older sister had one, so I felt like okay, I'm next in line, I guess. Like, when am I gonna like hear the big the big announcement? So like I had like a suspecting feeling that was going to happen. It wasn't until and the thing is, I didn't want a quinces, so just like they're gonna bring it up, but I actually don't want one because the thought of being in a big poofy dress was just like not appealing to me at that time in my life. So when it came to like my parents sitting me down one summer and they're just like, "Hey, we've been saving up for this quinces of yours, and we want to throw it, but we also want to make sure that you're also on board because it's a what's it called? Not a sacrifice, but it's a uh I don't know what the word, it's not coming to me right now, but it's like tradition and they've been saving up for it, but they just want to know what they're getting themselves into. And so as we are having that conversation, I was thinking about how important it would be for my abuela because her health wasn't really great at the time, for my cousins and stuff. And so I'm just like, okay, like, what's the worst that can happen? Like I'll do it. And we kind of agreed on like the theme, which was like just silver, colors and stuff. Because for the quinces, like, the quinceañera usually is very excited about the theme. So I'm just like, I'll just go with the silver color. It's fine. But yeah, so I had a part in the decision making to some degree. And so like I'm glad I went with it because in the end the party was really fun and I had a blast with my family. And the moment of having that big quince speech was very like I was very nervous about that, but I felt like in my head it would last for like ever. But as soon as I got up and like said my whatever I was gonna say, it lasted like not even like 5 minutes. So just like all this buildup of like the what ifs, like what if this goes wrong, it was like nothing. And so it was fine. And I'm glad I did it because it was just a really nice experience. And yeah, it's fun. So yeah, I would recommend people to have a quinces if they can afford it.
That's really empowering because, you mentioned that you're a little bit more on the introverted side. I can see how
Mm.
something so big, so public, so you center of attention, could make a person really feel like, oh, this isn't for me. But I'm glad, choosing, having that choice and choosing to power through, you felt like it was rewarding. I hadn't really thought, obviously I know quinces is a rite of passage. And I taught and worked with teenagers for a long time in Texas. I'm very familiar with invitations going out and all the hubbub about it. But I think this
Mhm.
book was the first thing that made me really understand it as a community building thing,
Mhm.
both
Mhm.
like within the family and then also within the larger community because of how quinceañeras are such a big social event for like a family's social circle. And so seeing how the time they spent together prepping for stuff become the stories that Sue and her relatives are then like that's part of their little bank of cuentos later. That was a really novel experience for me, and I'm so pleased to be able to see that
Aw.
like peek inside.
Yeah, I'm so glad because like when we think of quinceañeras, like we don't really think about like the build up and like the planning that goes into it, and just like oh, it's a big party. But like I mentioned before, like our culture is very much community based, and so like everyone kind of helps and chip in as much as they can. So like for my quinces, like it just like kind of Sue, where everyone did the decorations. I had neighbors come over with like our dishes and food and all that. And so it's just nice to know that like, community has my back, and it's just like a nice message to set for the quinces, like theme as well, and just like experience of just like, yes, this young girl is becoming a woman and becoming a leader in her society, but she knows that her community has her back as well. So giving her that confidence of just like, okay, I can step forward and move forward into my life, knowing that if I were to fall back, there's someone behind me that has my back. So it's just nice, like a nice message to have. So I'm glad I was able to provide that in the story as well, and I'm glad it touched you as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Um, so Sue, like you, is really passionate about comics, and is, working through, obviously, like turns this whole trip into a comic. Um, what advice do you have for writers like Sue who are working on their first full-length graphic novel?
Ooh, also a good question. I would say um to expose yourself to different forms of books, like different genres, to different forms of art as well, so like sculpture, painting, anything that doesn't feel familiar to you, because you never know when that will inspire you for your next story, or for the story that you're working on. um, and just be open to like new experiences. And yeah, it's just, I think people tend to forget that our writing and our art is like a reflection of ourselves and our experiences. So if we close ourselves to new experiences and new other forms of art, we are doing a disservice to ourselves, because we are not, it's like such integral part of ourselves and our growth. And so that's my advice to people. Just like, yeah, just keep reading different forms of books, different forms of art, like take up a new hobby that doesn't feel like hobbies that you find yourself not being good at first are like perfect, because it's like you learn more, and like the pressure of being perfect, and like being able to like, I have to be good at this hobby or good at this one thing that I'm learning. It's just so integral in our brains, especially in a society where like perfection is like what we aim for, that we tend to forget about the process of how we get there. And so I think that's important for us to kind of um practice. So yeah, just that's my advice. And like artist blocks and writer blocks are very normal. Like as long as you kind of take a break, because that's our brain telling us, hey, you need to take a break. You've been working at this for too long. Like, go out for a stretch, like hang out with friends, like go to a museum, get inspiration somewhere else. Cause yeah, it's just our like brains are like a muscle. So like you need to kind of like work on it for some time. So that's my advice from experience.
I love that. And I think your book teaches that lesson too, right? Because if Sued had her druthers, she would have stayed home with her manga and her comic camp, and she wouldn't have had the content for the comics she was able to write. And I think that
Exactly.
can be really hard for middle schoolers and high schoolers who have a really intense passion, as they just want to devote a lot of time and energy to that. So I love hearing that, like, go see and experience different kinds of art and go do things that push your comfort and confidence levels, because I think that's a great message. Like, she really expanded as an artist because of what she was, willing to experience here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So curious minds want to know, what are you working on right now? What might we see next?
Well, I'm actually working on a sequel to Miss Quinces. So, I don't think it's been officially announced yet, but yeah, I'm currently working on the inks right now, and so the I guess I can give away what a little snippet of what's it about. But basically, this time Sue goes to camp with her friends and kind of learns how to be more independent, and so she has that experience for herself this time. So I'm very excited, and I get to relive like my camp dreams and camp like memories as well. So I'm very excited for people to read that.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm glad we get to spend more time with Sue. Now, you said that you like to push yourself into hobbies and consuming different kinds of art just to, keep things fresh and expand your mind and your palette. Are you willing to share any museums that you like to visit, or hobbies that you've picked up to try to remind yourself you don't have to be perfect at everything?
That's a really good question. um, so I am, like I mentioned before, an introvert, and so I love doing like hobbies that require me to be at home. So usually it's like scrapbooking because it's like for me, no pressure. If I mess something up, like no one's gonna see it. But lately I've actually been roller skating, which doesn't come naturally to me. So I'm just I feel like a toddler just learning to like walk properly whenever I'm skating, which is great because it feels very humbling of just like this is nothing I'm really good at, but like I'm having fun with it and I'm spending time outside of the house. And so that's what I've been really into lately. And in terms of museums, my favorite museum of all time, and I haven't found a museum that would like top it, but like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York is just it's top tier. Like it might be biased, but like I love it. I guess the museum here in Austin that comes close to it is the Blanton, which been discovering lately, and I'm just like I haven't explored all of it yet, but like I saw the medieval part, the medieval section, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is incredible. I need more time in here. But if you have any recommendations, I'm always open to that as well.
Oh, I mean, it's hard to top the Metropolitan Museum in America. Certainly, Austin isn't on the scale of New York City. I think
Mm.
the Blanton's a great place. I think if you want to get weirder, there's always Umloft Sculpture Gardens or Laguna Gloria to go see things
Ooh.
out, especially when the weather is nice. Laguna Gloria, you got like,
Mm.
wildflowers and a view of the lake and all that good stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, certainly in New York, you've got the Met, you've got um, cloisters. If you like your
Oh my
medieval art,
god.
you got so many
Yeah.
choices right there at your feet. Um,
Mhm.
I love that you're giving yourself permission to enjoy things that you are terrible at. I think that's really something that like teenagers and just people everywhere need to not feel like the quality of their performance and their enjoyment have to be linked. Like you can sometimes it's super fun to suck at things, like you said, because there's no pressure. You get to just have a good time and dismiss all of that like angst. You can't turn it into a side hustle. Um, you're
Yeah.
not competing with anybody. You're not trying to
Mhm.
rank. And so I think that's really, really wonderful. And I love that you scrapbook and that, we've got multiple ways, both through our comics and our scrapbooking, that we're saving up and treasuring those memories and like making such like a beautiful sort of visual record of lives and stuff like that. I think that's
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you mentioned like that might like fighting off the mentality of making profit off of your hobbies. Like as a creator, that's my struggle constantly. I'm just like I'm so used to making prints and artwork that I sell, but then I'm just like, okay, I'm scrapbooking, but this is only for me. This is only for me. Like they're not selling like have to get out of that mentality of just like every time I pick up like pottery or something, I'm just like, okay, this is for you. This is not for sale. Like get out of the mentality. So it's really hard to kind of step out of that.
yeah. I mean, I think just giving yourself permission to like have joy and not, and the teen version of that is like always trying to figure out what you're going to be when you grow up, and every interest you have is one like road you could take or not take that you'll always sort of question. But I love giving young people permission early to just love things for the sake of loving them and to not feel like they have to turn everything into a possible when I grow up and be.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a beautiful message.
Well, I don't have any more questions. Is there anything that you're really excited to read? I know the authors these days like blurb a lot of books for their pals. Is there anything that you've read lately for middle grade or teens, or in the past year that you thought was really jazzy that you were excited for readers to get to experience?
Yeah, actually, my friend Steph Rodriguez came out with her debut graphic novel, Doodles from the Boogie Down, which is based on her experience living in New York, but also like in the Bronx specifically. and just her journey into discovering art and wanting to get into like art school, which we actually went to the same art high school. So in the story, she's applying to like the same one we were at. So I highly recommend her story because it's just so relatable, but also like she's so funny. Like, her stories are and the characters are so hilarious. So I highly recommend that book.
That one's great. I really like the color. It's like
Oh my god, it's so good.
surprisingly whimsical for something that's about real life. I thought that was really gorgeous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really fun. There's so many moments where I'm just like, oh my god, stop. This is hilarious. Yeah, so and I can't
And
think of any other
I like
ones.
that you chose to set things in Texas instead of New York. I thought that was a, interesting choice since obviously you went to school in New York. Was there a reason you decided to set Sue's life in Texas instead of New York?
So actually in the story, it takes place in New York.
Oh, sorry, my
No,
mistake. It's
we're
been a
good.
minute.
No, we're good. No, so she goes to New York, but actually I've been thinking a lot about my experience living here in Texas, and it's actually inspired for my other stories, other pitches that I've been working on. So it's just like my experience of like living in New York and then growing up in New York and then living here in Texas have been so drastically different that it's just been like a culture shock of just like I grew up with the one mentality, but coming here and and feeling like I had to like slow down my like hustle and bustle like mentality and kind of appreciate nature and just like what life has to like offer. It's just for me, it was like so necessary that I want my other characters to experience that as well. So it's just really nice. But yeah, yeah, sorry about that. I
Oh
don't
no,
meant to like
that's my fault.
No, you're good.
But no, I love that. I love wanting to give your characters different, like growing up experiences based on all the different experiences you've been able to have across your life. I think, my perspective is that this is a city, but having only visited New York, I can see it's really different. And I can
Mhm.
imagine just like culturally growing up in each place, giving you a really different take on the world.
Yeah, because we're also just humans are so adaptable that like, we learn how to like not assimilate, but just like adapt into our environments. And so I just wanted, even just like in Quinces, you kind of see that in Suyapa as well, of just like adapting from like New York mentality to like the, Central American, Honduran mentality. So it's just really interesting to see that shift in people. And my brain, I'm just like, ah, psychology. Like I love, I love stuff like that. So it's just really cool to see that.
Yeah, I like that time she had to really slow down and appreciate, and just sort of like sit and be, which isn't something people always get
Mhm.
when they're living the city life or just generally like in the hustle bustle of school and work and everyday lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me. I'm so excited for your next book. I think that's wonderful. And I'm so excited for more people to get to read Miss Quinces and get to spend time with Sue and all of her family.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and like thank you for supporting my book and I'm glad it touched your I don't know, your heart and everyone who's been reading it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today for our Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight with Kat Fajardo. Be sure to check out our Spirit of Texas website for book club activities, read-alikes, and more for Miss Quinces and for all of our 2023 Spirit of Texas books and authors. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon to the Texas Library Association's Young Adult Roundtable YouTube channel and the Spirit of Texas website. And just thank you again, Kat and Heather, for our time together today. It was so fun to sit back and listen to this conversation. And we're so honored to have you on our 2023 spot list, Kat.
Yay, thank you so much.